I'm Debbie Godfrey, and welcome to Season 2 of the Positive Parenting Pep Talks podcast, where I'll be answering your questions about positive parenting. So sit back and listen to what some parents have asked and what my suggestions are for them. And please remember to like, subscribe, and share, and give us a great review if you like this Pep Talks podcast. Thank you so much for being here and happy parenting.
Okay, so Karen, do you have another question?
I do not.
Okay, and Emily anymore? I'll go check my email.
No,
real quick, but I don't.
I mean, I guess later at the next one, maybe you can talk about the drinking thing because I hadn't even thought about that. The drinking.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it sneaks up on you. When you
we're not there anywhere near there, but
no,
you
don't imagine them dating and drinking and going off. Yeah, and it's just all of a sudden they're teenagers, and then you have to address all these things. We can next time if you think there's a context for it, but really it's just it's going to go back to one of those things where everybody has a different value system with it. So you're going to want to figure out how you are going to respond to things and handle them. And it's going to vary depending on how young. I mean, luckily my kids and we're all late bloomers, so my kids didn't really start experimenting with stuff till they were older, whereas some of you parents are going to have to deal with this stuff. I mean, as early as 5th, 6th grade, kids are getting into things and stuff. So I know not all of them, and some of them can make it through junior high and high school, but everything is out there, and so you guys are going to have to discuss with your spouses, and I'm an advocate for keeping things pretty open and the communication going, but not everybody's comfortable with that. So it's not, I can't really advise anybody on the values. It's you pick your values and then use the stuff we do in class to kind of get you there. And I will say that for me personally, my parents said this is not drinking, this is getting pregnant. Like you should not have sex till you're married, and they didn't. They were married when my mom was 19 or whatever, and then 2 years later they had me and all my brothers and all that stuff, and they didn't have sex before they were married supposedly. And every single one of us, me and all 3 of my brothers, and I know I'm saying my English wrong, but we all had kids out of wedlock. And so I just look at that and I go, I just don't think the preaching thing works real well. And so with my kids, I just took a much different tactic of being honest and being open with things. I mean, we went through kids wanting to get tattoos, kids wanting to get things pierced, kids, my kids have wanted to experiment and explore in all areas, and I've got stories with all kinds of things, and pretty much they've been really mellow, as compared to me and other kids I know in terms of what they've experimented with and how long they've waited to experiment with things. And I've been really happy with the results. And none of them got pregnant out of wedlock, or without intention. Actually, my daughter, Brianna, did, but they chose to have a baby before they got married, and then they got married. But it wasn't like me where it was all accidents and whatever. And so just taking that approach to be more open, to keep the communication going, that was like my tactic based on my experience. So each of you have to take, what did you learn growing up? How can you take whatever you learned and how your parents did it, what they did well, what they didn't do well, and what are you going to do? And that's what you want to start working towards, is the thinking about philosophically how are you going to handle this, and then how can you start incorporating that at age-appropriate levels early, so that you have the conversation going. I've done things like had notebooks with my kids, like journals where I'll write to them and they write back to me. And we started that really young, Brianna and I, and because her and I she wasn't so good about talking about things, but we could write things to each other. So whenever she had questions about puberty and different stuff like that, we would always write them to each other. And so just figuring out a way to keep the communication open. And whereas my middle one, she talks about everything. It's like, TMI, Michelle. So they're just all very, very different. And keeping the communication open, though, I think I could pretty much say across the board that's going to benefit you. Even if you have really strict stances on certain things, you will get away with that.
It's interesting because I feel like my husband's family is French. He's French. And so their, wine is like very much at every meal, and the kids have all had little
nudity all over the place. Right.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it's just moderation, but it's very, like they have a very European stance where it's like kids are entitled to taste the wine, and it's fine, and I feel like we're very open with it, but then I wonder if it could go one of, two ways. It could be like, well, this is just part of life, we're not going to overdo it, like we see that this is, or it could go like, this is old news, we're going to move on to the next harder thing, or, I don't know, so it's interesting to think about, like, being, I'd like to keep the lines open, like you're saying, but
yeah, and
I don't,
statistically, that is the case. So in the French culture, I actually hadn't thought about it in French, but I know with Jewish culture, we're raised with wine from very early on, and there's very little alcoholism in the cultures where it's part of your whatever that you're raised with. And whereas when you look at, say, Native Americans, it was never part of their culture. And so when it got introduced, the Native American population had
rampant alcoholism.
Yeah. And it's because of the way that it hasn't been a part of that culture forever, and in a correct context, it doesn't become a problem. And so then I think every other culture is somewhere in between, these extremes. And so that's in your favor that you get to keep drinking your wine.
Okay, good.
Oh yeah, culturally the French aren't alcoholics, or they're not raging alcoholics, right? I mean, there was a great book I read a while back. It was called French Women Don't Get Fat, and it was about that exact same thing. You have a nice piece of chocolate and a really nice glass of wine, and it's moderation. You just don't go crazy, and that's why they're all skinny. So, I think with our kids, the same thing is keeping that idea of moderation. And of course, we can't know any of our kids' paths, and so some of them are going to choose paths that are more challenging, harder, and some of them are going to skate through, and we just are going to influence them to, like, I just parented the best I could. And I was so excited to have this information because this really helped me do my best. And even though I wasn't perfect, and in some areas probably not even that good, I did my best. Like, I don't look back with too many regrets about things. I really tried really hard. And so even when they have struggles and challenges and things like that, for the most part, I can handle that pretty well, like without taking it on or being too upset about it. And I think when I see parents with a lot of regrets about the things that they did, and these are parents of, kids that are adults, like, oh, I wish I would have done all this stuff differently, I would be really sad. I would hate having that kind of regretful thing. And so that's one of the best things I think this class gave me, was that I feel like I did my very best. And for the most part, it was pretty good. So, and I think my kids would agree. They actually appreciate all that I did within, I had a lot of challenges too. And I think they appreciate most of what I did. And it was the communication that I got taking this class that I think that's why it came across well, and that my relationship with all of them is really, really strong, whereas many of us just don't have a very strong relationship with our parents. When that gets damaged usually during high school is when the relationships get really damaged. And us teenagers don't forgive real quick, So, figuring out how to keep the communication going and keep the conversations going and all that, I think, is going to be really key. I'll tell you one more story. This is teenagers, since you're talking about thinking into the future. Brianna, when she was 14, was it? I think it was when she was 14. She wanted to get her eyebrow pierced, and her friend wanted to get her belly button pierced. And this is before all that stuff was, I think now it's much more common, but back then this would have been 15, 16 years ago. So it was before it became really crazy, rampant. And I had been teaching my parenting teenagers workshop for like 4 years at that point. And one of the ideas in that workshop is that you ask your teenager to wait 30 days before making a big decision about something. And so her and her friend come to me with this, I want to get my eyebrow pierced. Jen wants to get her belly button pierced. Will you take us? And I said, well, that sounds like a pretty big decision. And I'm like freaking out inside, okay? Like I don't want my daughter piercing her eyebrow. And but I didn't express that. I was just like, that sounds like an interesting idea or whatever. I go, why don't the two of you research it online, and I want you to wait 30 days. And this is when online was just starting, too. It was pretty early. And wait 30 days, and then let's discuss it again. And so I just started praying, basically. I'm like, oh, my gosh, what am I going to do? I can't have a kid with an eyebrow, but I don't want to go head-to-head with her on getting a power struggle because kids will go behind your back and do stuff, right? If you tell them no, if they can do it, a pretty obstinate kid will go do it. And I don't want to get myself in that position anyway. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do? Oh, my gosh, this is terrible. And I'm freaking out. And I'm trying to plan my attack. And at a certain point, a week or two into this, I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to pull rank on her. I'm just going to say, no, you can't do this. And I very rarely did that, especially with her, because she was a good decision maker for the most part. She I thought she needed a lot of empowerment for her self-esteem to be able to make decisions about things. So I did not like pulling rank on her because she wasn't a kid who needed it at all. And so, but in my head, I just decided I was going to do that because I couldn't visualize a way that I could live with her piercing her eyebrow at that point in time. And now if she had it, I would love it, but whatever. At that point in time, it wasn't in my repertoire of things. This is my first kid, and, when you start experiencing this stuff, it's a little more freaky than once you've had a few kids and you start getting used to it. But, and so 3 weeks in, her and her friend Jennifer had been researching. They had called a few of the tattoo parlors and talked to them, and they came to me and they said, well, we talked to 3 tattoo parlors, and 2 of them said they wouldn't even do it for us because we're still growing, it would move. And the one who said they would, and we just really decided we don't really want to do it yet, we'll wait. And I was like, yay, thank you.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't have to pull rank, but like I said, when I was thinking through this, in that moment, I decided I would have. And then flash forward to Michelle. When Michelle turned 16, she wanted to get her belly button pierced, and she was part of this big cheerleading team, and there was this whole thing. And this is 5 years later where it became much more common, and it wasn't such an outrageous thing to do. And so with her, she is a more rebellious kid. This is a kid who I know for a fact if I say no, she's going to go do it behind my back. And so I don't want to put myself in that position. So when she decided, first of all, she was 2 years older. Second of all, I did have to talk with her about one of the people in my class because I was talking about this with people I was teaching in my class. And one lady, she's like, oh, tell her not to do it. I had mine done, and when I got pregnant, it hurt and this and that, and it moved. And so I shared that story with her, and I said, but if you're still determined to do it, I'll support you, but I only have one requirement. And she's like, what is that? And I go, that I get to hold your hand while you're getting it done. And so she's like, okay. So it was like me and her cheer coaches, and, we went down and she got her belly button pierced. And it's only been, she's 20, she's going to be 26 at the end of this month. I think she got it when she was 16, so it's been 10 years. And it's just this last year where she started saying, she's not wearing the belly button piercings anymore. And she's like, I kind of wish I hadn't done it. It's like, oh, well. So what does that mean? I should have not let you do it? She's like, no, because, she's like, I would have done it anyway, but blah, blah, blah. So those are just 2 stories. FYI, you guys, you will encounter these things. And I think having the confidence now from the way that you're managing and handling power struggles and the way that you're communicating, have fun with it. Be excited because this is where you're headed. And they're great kids, and they do know how to make good decisions. And sometimes they don't. And when they don't, you get to be the safe haven, if stuff happens, and you can be there to comfort them and support them. And so it's all okay, Emily. You ready?
Yes, well, I mean, just to mimic or tell you that I had like everything pierced, everything. Like I
Oh,
had my
really?
ears pierced, I had my nose septum pierced, I had my belly button, and I took them out by the time I was like 24. I went and got reconstructive surgery on my ears. I mean, it was like,
Oh my.
and in hindsight, it's this thing that I'm like, I wish I had known back then that I wouldn't like it as an adult. Like I didn't like how I felt like people looked at me when I was actually in my career, when I got out of college, and it didn't last that long for me, but it's interesting. I had to do it. It was one of those things my mom couldn't have told me no, and at that point when I got my ears stretched out, I was over 18, so it wouldn't have mattered anyways, but it's something, at least I have that story to share with my kids and can show them the pictures of how hideous I looked with all of that, so
Exactly.
you would never know it now.
Yeah, and that's the only place you're going to have power, because you just said it. My parents could have never talked me out of it, right? And so, so your only power is going to be in your story, and I think that's where I've excelled. My kids are horrified at all the things that I've done. They're like, you would never do that. You would never do any of that stuff. Oh my gosh. And and it's because I shared it, because a lot of parents have stories and they're afraid to share them with their kids, that it'll influence them badly. But I think the empathy and the honesty policy works way better with our kids. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thanks. I agree.
Okay, so I think that should be it. Does anybody have any other questions or comments or anything they want to throw in here before I end the call?
Debbie, I don't know, am I on mute or you can hear me?
Yep, no, you're here. You're great. I hear you.
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment, and I just want to let you know that this parenting class has really helped change my relationship with Barron, and I'm just grateful for being able to improve my parenting, and also kind of meet Barron where he's at and just love him more unconditionally than I have. I've had huge success from this class, and I just wanted to let you know.
Woohoo! Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, that's why I teach it, because that's the kind of results I got from it. So I love sharing with other people, and it's great. It's great stuff, and it really does make a difference. So good for you guys for using it, because that's the only way it works. I can teach all I want, but it's you actually putting it into action with your kids that makes it believable when you can see the results. So awesome. Thank you, Karen, for that. Okay, you guys, I will see you on Monday. We're talking about handling feelings. That's a fun topic.
I'm guessing you found today's pep talk valuable, and hopefully it gave you some practical tools and ideas for dealing with your children's behavior. If you'd like to work more deeply on these topics and similar topics, please join me over at my website, positiveparenting.com. I'll put a link in the description box here. I have classes starting all the time, classes that are self-directed where you can listen to lessons on your own time, and also Q&A calls where I answer your questions, just like the parents in these pep talks. So I hope, again, that you will like and share and rate this podcast and help more parents be able to see it and hear it and get help from it. Thanks again, and happy parenting.